Hello, everybody, and welcome to Deadlock and Load, episode 19. My name is Cryptic here with BSJ and our new guest here today, Deathy. What is up, man? How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing fantastic. Just excited to talk Deadlock and other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've this is a conversation we've been kind of wanting to have for a while, and it feels like you are in the literal perfect position to finally kind of talk about some of the topics that we have lined up for today. So no spoilers for anyone quite yet, but it should be a great conversation. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm didn't know before that we you okay, so it was Ricky's idea to get you on here, Deathy, and I wasn't aware of your history with video games that line up so much with ours. I was looking at your YouTube, and we don't rather than letting you introduce yourself entirely, we're going to give people what you put as your one sentence on YouTube. You are a pro
Mhm.
FPS games player, an ex TF2 player, Overwatch, and a 6.5k MMR Dota player. Shout out to the Dota players out there. And you're now playing Deadlock and making
Yep.
educational content. So honestly, I feel like that matches a lot about my bio. So like I'm already a fan if I just read that one sentence going in, just somebody who had a bunch of games they really took seriously, but now there's one game that just hit different. So
Yep.
I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself as like now you're known as a Deadlock content creator. When did that start? How did you get into that? What's like your backstory here?
Right. So I guess you have to go back to when I started playing Deadlock, which is for those that don't know, the Deadlock playtest, as far as I'm aware, began sometime in mid to late April. So you can go in like the official Deadlock Discord and look at the post history, and that's roughly when you'll see like the first people were getting in, and Yoshi was like, "Hey guys, welcome." I personally got in around mid to late May. I think May 21st or something was when I got into the Deadlock playtest. When I was still under NDA, and it was roughly back when I was starting to see some leaks on like Twitter and stuff about like, hey, there's might be like a new Valve game, and I didn't really believe it. But then one of my friends was like, hey, there's actually a new Valve game. You want in? I was like, oh, that's awesome, sure. And so I started playing Deadlock, and back then the playtest had extremely limited hours. Like it started at like 9 p.m. Eastern, and it would go on until like 6 a.m. But I worked as a consultant like 9 to 5, so like obviously couldn't keep playing until 6 a.m. Right, so I would like log in at 9, play until whenever I could, which was like midnight or like 1 a.m. if I wanted to be really sleep deprived, and then I'd keep going. And so I like grinded a ton of Deadlock. It was like awesome. And I was playing Dota pretty much all the time before that, but then I completely stopped playing Dota and I only played Deadlock. Um, and then when the NDA, when they released without the NDA, where they were like, oh, you can stream the game, which was like late August, mid to late August. I decided just like to make a YouTube video for fun because I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at the game, and it's gonna be like a decent opportunity. And it was like completely horrible. Like the audio was messed up. Like I did zero editing. Literally, I just recorded it, put it out. Like terrible audio. Like I had no script or no idea what I was gonna say. And I just released it, and then over a couple days, it like at first there was not many views, and then like 4 or 5 days later, it was like at 30, 40K views, and I was like, okay, um, maybe there's something. So then I started making more videos, and then there was a lot of momentum that was going in because not a lot of people were making Deadlock content, right? So I was early, which very often being early is good. Um, and so I kept going, and then I just like my goal was just I'm gonna make a video every day. Doesn't matter how bad the video is. Doesn't matter that I have no idea what I'm doing. Doesn't matter that I've never edited videos in my life. I have to learn to do it. So I set myself a goal, did a video every day for like a month, and then pretty much like after a few weeks, I was like, I can't juggle this and work because like I'd come home, I'd like sit down and eat my food as I was editing my video, like record the next video, then play Deadlock, and then I basically had no life. So I was like, I told my wife, I'm gonna quit my job.
Wait,
To which she was like, "Oh, okay. Really? That's weird." Because, as a consultant, I was making like a pretty good salary and like it was stable and everything, and so like, you know, it was definitely like a shock to her, but she supported it, and that's where I am today, I guess. Now it's been like 7, 8 months and still going.
Was that like an like you made it sound like it was almost like overnight? So as you say, you made a video every day for a month. Was it like after that full month that you made that decision,
It was
or
after like 2 weeks or so. Essentially, after 2 weeks, I was like, okay, I have a lot of momentum on my side. I want to keep going, but at the same time, I kind of feel like this is not sustainable from just like I'm just super sleep deprived every day. And like I was like I had two options in my mind. One was either I slow down the content creation and I just like keep, going to my regular job, or I go all into the content creation. And I decided for the latter. It's obviously a very risky choice. I would not recommend that anyone do what I did. Like, at the time there was really no guarantee that this would have worked out at all. It ended up working out, which I'm very grateful for, but like it could have been a disaster.
did you? I know I'm not giving Ricky any space to ask questions here, but
No, you're good.
did you have like a moment in there where you're like, what's worst case scenario? Like, let's just say this entire
yeah,
Deadlock
sure.
thing like flopped. Like, what did you envision was like worst case scenario there?
Yeah. I mean, I talked to my wife about it quite a bit. I was like, worst case scenario, I just go back to work. I couldn't really envision myself like trying to pursue content creation in like another game or anything like that. For me, it's about the passion I have for Deadlock. And if Deadlock doesn't work out, I don't like, let's say even today, there's still a chance that, I don't know, like Valve hasn't really said like what they plan to do 100%. So let's say that they scrap the entire project. It's not impossible. Seems very unlikely with how much work they've put in, but I would just, go back to work, find a job, and move on with my life and be happy I got to experience this.
Right on.
That's pretty cool. I like that. Kind of talking more about your life than I think there's like a moment when like a lot of us like kind of get into gaming initially. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's maybe
Yeah.
there was like one specific game, or it was just like something you grew up doing. So like for you, like, were you always a gamer? Was this something you kind of discovered later in life on your own? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I was pretty much always a gamer. My mom likes to say that one of the first words that I learned, so I'm actually French Canadian, for those that don't know. And one of the first words that I learned, English is my second language, but in French is, she tells me all the time that I learned the word manette, which means controller. And she's like, yeah, it's one of the first words that you learned. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know if it's true. Maybe she's just lying to me. But I had older siblings, and so it was pretty much impossible for my parents to keep me away from the video games, right? Because my siblings are like older than me by 10 years, and so they had like
Ah,
a
okay.
Nintendo 64 and like these other things, and PCs. And so I would play, sneak onto my older brother's PC, play Diablo 2. I would play Nintendo 64 like Diddy Kong Racing or like James
Hell
Bond,
yeah!
GoldenEye,
First
like
game
that
I
type
ever
of stuff.
got. Sorry, Diddy Kong Racing. Shout
Yeah.
out.
No, it's good stuff. And yeah, so I don't know, as long as I've been alive, pretty much, as long as I can remember, I've played video games to some extent.
I feel like that just and like that's kind of like a common thread I see with especially like people on the content creation side, because there is like a different level of like passion and commitment that it takes to kind of get into it. Um so that's super cool. Now you said you kind of quit your job as a consultant, became a
Yeah.
full-time
I think
Deadlock
he fully
content
quit his
creator.
job. He didn't kind of quit his job, Ricky.
Yeah, okay, you
Yeah,
fully
yeah.
quit your job, right?
Yeah.
There's no going back now.
Oh, there
Um
is. If it
No,
did.
just
no,
maybe to a
there
different
actually is
job.
no going back because, well, I mean, like for example, sometimes there's ways where you can quit your job. I was basically like, I told my boss, I was like, look, I know that this is like not ideal, but I basically just like quit on the spot pretty much. I didn't give
Like
like 2 or 3
no two
weeks.
weeks.
I was like, I'm burnt out. I can't do this. So I probably burnt the bridge there, to be honest, with that company. Although my boss was very understanding and he was supportive of it, I don't really think that they would take me back at that specific company, and I would understand as well.
Yeah. Okay. So that being the case, how has this type of change kind of like affected your life from like the day to day? Like how different are things now compared to where they were before?
I mean, it's pretty much nothing is even really remotely close. As far as like a schedule perspective, is completely different. Gaming, especially competitively, is more of like an evening thing, right? So like my stream is most likely going to be from like 4 p.m. to midnight a lot of the time, whereas I would work, from 9 to 5. So that's very different. So during the day, I have like more free time, but at the same time, I'm my own boss and I do other things, right? Like I do coaching, for example, as well. Similar to you, BSJ. And Yeah, it's affected kind of everything. I've never been my own boss before, so I actually I always thought that I would not be able to be my own boss because I was like, I don't know, I'm not like business minded enough. Like, I didn't really think I had it in me to be my own boss. And like, even when Deadlock was popping off in the momentum, I could have taken a lot more opportunities, a lot more sponsors, like a lot more all these things. And I refused almost all of it because I was just like, I don't know, I'm just focused on doing content right now. And I don't want to like do these things that I don't really know like what it entails or like, you know, who these companies are, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and as far as just my regular life, I mean, at first it was hard to balance because when you start content creation, when you're working 9 to 5, like outside of you, like if it's 6 p.m., you can't just randomly decide like, oh, I'm gonna work a little more to make extra money. But when you're doing content creation, technically any second that you're spending not doing content creation is a second that you could be doing content creation, right? It might sound extreme, but at first I felt really bad about spending time with my friends or doing these things because I was like, well, instead of doing that, I could just be like streaming and then making another video and then like, keeping my momentum going.
I want to interject into this because it doesn't sound crazy to me at all. Because I mean, this was actually when I lived with Ricky. I remember I don't know if I ever explicitly expressed this to you, Ricky, but back then I was so deep in the mindset that you just stated, Deathy. The whole like every moment I'm not working, I could be working. So what I was doing at the time was, since I'm not business oriented perhaps per se, but I am numbers oriented. So like I would be thinking, oh, I make $35 an hour based on like ads and subs and donate whatever, all of it added together if I were to stream. So every time I go to a movie, that's costing me $70. Like that's actually how I started thinking about things, and it's twisted. It's not good. It's not how you're supposed to think about things, guys. It's like you're supposed to, or not supposed to, but I think the healthy balance is, how much can I work? How, like, what is the amount that I'm not jeopardizing the product, all that kind of stuff. But I totally get that trap, being your own boss, like knowing like the only person that lets you have time off is you. So like then you also have to be the person that motivates yourself, and you also have to discipline yourself technically. Like there's also nobody saying, hey, you're not doing your job. There's nobody doing that either. So I can just relate on many different levels to everything you just said. So it's to me, it's really funny to hear somebody. It's not a funny process, but it's funny to hear somebody going through it with Deadlock the same way. I mean, I guess the cycle continues. I think that's probably a lesson that pretty much every content creator full time will have to learn, or already did learn.
That is true, and I do have a little bit of an anecdote which I shared with Ricky in DMs or whatever, but I think it's a good time to say about it. But essentially, one thing that kind of inspired me to do this is you, BSJ, because when I played Dota, so like my Dota story, the TLDR of it is I was an FPS player my whole life. I never played MOBAs. Well, I had like some Dota hours like casually or whatever. Like I started playing in 2013, but like I would just play Earthshaker and like be like literally terrible. But then in like 2019, I just like was kind of bored of FPS games, and I decided like, hey, I'm gonna try getting good at Dota because I was good at FPS games, so why not? And then COVID happened shortly after, and so I had a little bit more time on my hands as well. And so I started like grinding Dota really hard, and I was 1.5k MMR, like not very good, politely put. And I watched like I watched so many YouTube videos. I watched a lot of your videos. I watched also Zeke Exotics, which you guys may be familiar with.
That's my co-caster. Zach's the homie.
I just met him.
Oh, there you go.
At Raleigh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I watched a lot of that, and then I went from 1.5 to 6.5k in like 2 years, which I think for Dota terms is pretty fast, like that, because you don't gain a lot of MMR per game. You have to play a lot, right? So, yeah, and then I was like, I wanted to make essentially similar type of content with Deadlock that you make. So like early on, I was like, no, I'm not gonna lie, I was looking at your YouTube and I was like, okay, what do you do? And then I would just like figure out, oh, maybe I can do something similar with Deadlock.
That's very wholesome. Thank you. That does mean a lot to hear. I mean, it's funny because you said I wouldn't recommend anyone doing what I did, which was quitting your job and committing. And it's funny because I feel like I've said something similar in the past where it's like I would never recommend somebody do what I did, but at the same time, the dichotomy is that I would not take it back for anything. Like I'm very glad that I did it. So I guess the emphasis about it is there's a huge risk involved. There's a lot of unknowns, and those unknowns, I mean, I'm sure it's hit, because for me, I came out of college like where I'd been streaming part-time during college, and I told myself like I'm gonna give it like a year of full-time. So like I never had like a full-on normal career. I did have like college jobs, but never like entered my field. So my adulthood is not as contrasting as yours, where you went from like a very stable 9 to 5. But there's a lot of moving parts, and that's exciting to hear that people like myself had an inspiration, or at least maybe gave you the oomph to say fuck it, let's go for it. That's pretty much the only mentality I think you can have when it comes to the unexplored frontier of esports that's still in its infancy. So that's exciting. That's very wholesome as well. And yeah, I hope you were able to learn from my mistakes, because it's funny. I remember watching one of my YouTube videos back from like 9 years ago, and I was like, it randomly popped up on my feed for some reason, and I watched it. I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Like I literally was watching my own Slark guide, and I'm like, he's gonna go die. Like, what is he talking about? And then I end up dying, and then in the video, I'm like, oh, I died there, but it's fine. I was like, what? Like, come on, dude. But no, that's
I mean, I already look at my Deadlock stuff from just like 7-8 months ago, and I'm like, well, I've learned definitely
a lot since then.
I mean, as far as like video quality, right? But as far as also skill level, I mean, both in like Deadlock and Dota, I mean, these are MOBAs, right? And the game constantly evolves. So like, even if you were a really good player 7 months ago, today the game just has like a different skill level, right? Like the average player is just much better than they were like 7-8 months ago. And
of course,
I mean, the playtest has been going on for a little over a year at this point.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're almost at your anniversary. You said your first day was something like May 21st. So yeah, I mean,
I haven't been playing for a year, but some people have.
Was there anything that one of my last questions about your backstory, or like where you currently are with Deadlock and everything, is there anything that really surprised you about like content creation or the life that you're living now, good or bad, doesn't matter, just something you weren't exactly expecting and trying to figure it out now?
I think as far as good is, when I first got into it, my impression as a third party was that it wasn't really sustainable to be a content creator unless you were like really in the like upper echelons of viewership. So like, for example, if I saw a channel of my size, I wouldn't have really thought that it would be possible to sustain yourself off of it. Now, of course, I'm in a low cost of living area. I'm in Montreal, so like compared to a lot of other cities, it's lower cost. But regardless, I have like 25,000 subs on YouTube, and I don't know, I average like 300 to 350 viewers on Twitch. I also stream on YouTube as well. But regardless, I wouldn't have thought a channel that size could realistically like sustain, someone's income like enough to just like live like a normal life. But it can. Sometimes it is a bit of a struggle. Like, at my size, I mean, you guys probably like know the type of numbers that you can hit and stuff, and like, there's a lot of variety as well during the months and stuff. So it's definitely not as stable, but it's definitely like manageable. As far as like the bad stuff, I mean, at first, I mean, I have pretty thick skin, so I can't say I was really surprised, but obviously, like, some people, will just like hate or whatever. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really bother me, but like sometimes it bothers my wife more than it bothers me, which is funny. I can't really think of anything else bad other than that. Like, everything's been good for the most part.
Nice. That's a good problem to have, not being able to think about bad things.
For sure.
I think like
oh yeah, well actually there is one bad thing. Well, it's kind of, it's not really like, it's just very Deadlock specific. So like, if we talk about the state of Deadlock quickly, the thing about Deadlock is, let's say that you're a Dota content creator and you're a Dota streamer. Well, that like, what's going to happen, there's going to be TI at this month, there's going to be these tournaments, there's going to be these events, like you don't know when the patches are going to be, right? Like this, might take 200 days, it might take a little longer, who knows, right? But, you have some stability, like, that you're working with a fully developed game that gets regular patches and has regular events. Now with Deadlock, it's literally like people ask me all the time, like, oh, when do you think this game's gonna come out? When do you think this game's gonna have open beta? When do you think the next patch is? Like, what do you think is next? I'm just like, I have no clue, man. Like, the open beta could be in like 2 years for all I know. I have no idea, you know? So, and until that happens, Deadlock is essentially in a perpetual slump. And my content creation, I know, has like pretty much everyone that watches Deadlock content knows me at this point, right? I've hit my growth cap within Deadlock. And so for me to grow, Deadlock has to grow, right? If Deadlock does not grow, I can't really grow. It's just not possible mathematically, at least as far as I'm aware. And so I don't know when that's going to happen. So that's the bad thing, right? Is like right now, to be honest, like, you know, if it stayed like this forever and this stayed my current size, it's possible that I would just return to work at some point. But it's kind of like the hope that I'm building something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of unknowns outside of your control there for sure.
So as people like running a podcast, like that was something that we had to kind of weigh in on like fairly early, as we're like, well, there used to be a literal schedule for bi-weekly updates, which was great for us like scheduling content around it, and then everything kind of went dark, and we're like, well, you know, what are we going to talk about this week? Like, what kind of topics do we come up with? What type of ideas do we try and explore? And it's a lot of just speculation, right? And yeah, so I definitely sympathize with you on that end. You're obviously doing way more regular and constant content compared to, you know, what we do. So I can understand, you know, reasonably how difficult that can be. But I want to talk to you a little bit. So like you said, you come from an FPS and a MOBA background. Now that you played a little bit of Dota, if you had to choose one, which would you pick?
If I had to choose between Dota and Deadlock?
Between an FPS or MOBA, like if you had to say what genre is your favorite, what would you choose? Because I'm just curious. Really, MOBA for sure. Okay, cool. I thought like that's why I was like, you come from the background of both. I was like, some people like are just FPS, like that is just their genre and they love it to death. And so I'm kind of surprised. I actually thought you might be that would be a harder.
I like FPS games, but
I thought it would be harder for you to at least come to the conclusion on that one. So that's kind of neat.
What's your main reasoning? Like, what about MOBAs are so special for you?
Well, for me, it's like, okay, so when you play like a game like Counter-Strike or something, you know, you can just like, I don't know, someone like swings you and just like you get one tapped, and it is what it is. And for me, the thing about MOBAs is that there's so many little micro decisions throughout the game that can separate you from the average player. Like you can go to Counter-Strike, you can take Monacy, which if you guys are familiar with, like one of the best like current Counter-Strike 2 players, right? You know, Child Prodigy. You take him, you put him against me, and like I'm probably gonna kill him sometimes. It's gonna happen. You know what I mean? But you put me and I don't know, you put me against like Ana and Dota, like no shot I'm ever winning that. Ever, you know? Like it's just not gonna happen.
The question is, how many times do I have to lane against Quinn Callahan mid before I'll beat him once? You know, like I'm just saying,
probably a lot of times.
Probably at least 100 times. You know, I always laugh like because you said like Dota. Also, it's not like MOBAs in general. It's like not only is in the grand scheme of the game, but like the laning stage itself is like 5-6 minutes, similar to Deadlock. And it's like how many times, you know, in a game of Deadlock would a top tier player lose a lane to a lesser experienced player? And the answer is probably near 0%, right?
Exactly.
So, and that I definitely agree with that. I definitely love the small decision aspect, the micro decision aspect of MOBAs, and that's why I always think it's really funny when people ask me like for general tips to get better at MOBAs, like how do I become this rank instead of this rank? And my answer is always like, well, there's like hundreds of small decisions that go in there. So like, what part of your game would you like to work on? What skill would you like to hone? Because you know, trying to tell you why this guy's 3,000 MMR above you or several ranks above you in Deadlock in terms of medals, it's like you can't name, you know, one thing. There's no like core mechanic that defines that. So yeah, I'm more of like an all-encompassing, comprehensive skill set type of person as well. So I resonate with. We have a lot in common. Is all I gotta say about this.
That's cool. That's cool.
I gotta ask you though, because we talked about it last week on our podcast, the fact that you were doing the Death Slam event, and so I kind of
Yes.
want to pick your brain on it going into it, which is going to kind of be our main topic at some point, is kind of the competitive Dota scene. But you're like in a kind of a perfect bisect or trisection, really, of like the competitive scene, because you're a player, right? You play at the high end.
Yep.
You scrim, you have a team, you compete. You now
Mhm.
have hosted a community event, which is not at the same tier, but obviously
Yeah.
still pretty decent players. We've talked about the bar just being way higher for a lot of the players that are still
Yeah.
around in Deadlock. But then also
Mhm.
you're an avid viewer of the different, other tournaments that are around. So talk to us about kind of the Death Slam in general. Like, how did you come up with the idea? And then kind of what you've learned from that process, either, from, I guess, a TO standpoint or just like a content creation standpoint.
Yeah, sure. How about we just start with the history of Deadlock competitive tournaments?
Sure. Well, that
Because
is
I
that
think
what
that
part
would
is
be
that what led up
interesting.
to your decision? Did that contribute a lot to your decision?
Yes,
Okay, then there you go.
Cool.
it did
Start with it.
contribute,
Yeah.
and yeah. So essentially, okay. So Deadlock competitive. One thing that's very interesting is the first Deadlock tournament was actually organized before the NDA was released, and it actually happened right as people were like, "Oh, you can stream it." But it was organized like prior, and the people organizing it didn't know that the NDA was going to be lifted. And I was participating in that first tournament, and it was called the Downtown Showdown, I believe,
Yep.
if I
Downtown
recall
Showdown.
correctly.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And so, yeah, Deadlock has had a very grassroots competitive scene, which I'm very familiar with because my first competitive game was Team Fortress 2, which I played for a very long time. And not a lot of people are familiar with that game's competitive scene, or they're familiar with the game, but Valve has never like really supported TF2's competitive scene, and it's kind of always been this disconnect between the TF2 player base competitively. That's like, man, it would be so easy for Valve to just like make a post about our scene and like promote us super heavily, but they do literally nothing, and maybe they just like hate us. And then, regardless, so this scene is also very grassroots, similar to TF2. Like all the TF2 tournaments were, no help from Valve, like fully community made, all that. And so I kind of grew up with that environment. I started playing competitive TF2 when I was like 13. My voice, was still very high pitched and, got made fun of a lot, as you do when you're a little kid playing online games, especially, if we're talking like 15 years ago, the online environment's a little different, right? In like 2011. Um,
Yep.
and yeah, so Deadlock fully grassroots. A lot of tournaments happened. At first, the game was kind of on an upwards trajectory, like especially around like September, October. There was more events and bigger events. And in North America, that kind of period concluded around, I would say, December with the Space Station Gaming Tournament, which was a $5,000 tournament, which for Deadlock, $5,000 is big. I know that it's not big in the grand scheme of things, but for North American Deadlock, $5,000 was like the biggest prize pool we'd had until then. And so I got third place in that tournament with my team. And after that, in North America, it's pretty much just been Deadlock Fight Night and some very, very small events, such as, for example, Gluten Snake's Den, which is a very small tournament with like $100 prize pool, like just, because that's all I can afford to put in. And Deadlock Fight Night, without Fight Night, North American competitive Deadlock would essentially be dead, as far as I'm concerned. Like, there would be very, very little reason to scrim or form teams or do all that stuff. Now, in Europe, it's a different story. In Europe, there are actually signed teams. There's three of them, as far as I'm aware. Maybe a little more, but there's three, like, relevant, like, very relevant ones, which is VP, Perivision, and One Win. And so all three of those teams, as far as I'm aware, like I don't know the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that they're all salaried and they're probably all making like enough money to like play Deadlock full time. And on top of that, on top of Deadlock Fight Night, they tend to have other tournaments like the One Win Bombshell event, which is like a $10,000 tournament, which there's been 5 of so far. The fifth one just concluded recently. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect between Europe and NA, and a lot of people, think NA is like a bit of a joke region, similar to like Dota, where NA is like just it's just not competitive for the most part with EU, and like all the good NA players just go to EU anyway, right? Or they'll go win a TI with like a EU team. And yeah, so all in all, to say we were at a stage where competitive Deadlock in North America was not in a great state. It was a bit of a slump, and I felt in general the community was just in a little bit of a slump in the sense that people are like, it's been 2 months since the last major update, and people are just kind of like, they're a little bit not hopeless, but like, the energy is not quite there. And so that led to me kind of making my event because first of all, I wanted something that would be awesome for the community and that would be great content. But I thought, hey, what's like a type of the community that we haven't touched that yet? And so the partner that made this tournament with me, his name is Matt, also known as Ref Online. He actually is in Montreal too. He like reached out to me on Discord, talking to me about some ideas, and we actually had lunch together. And we were like talking about how the average player is so often forgotten, especially the guy that has like a job and like doesn't have time to grind the game, 10 hours a day, blah blah blah. And so we wanted to make an event for them. And also right now, like Deadlock with the player base and the matchmaking, etc. Like if you're just an average player, it can be like a bit of a rough experience sometimes. And so we wanted to give them an experience that they wouldn't forget and also give them a chance to play competitively, even though they know they're not going to be pro gamers. They're just like they're above average gamers, yes, but they're not anywhere near the level of a pro team. But we wanted to do something for them.
I think that's super fun. I know I tuned in a little bit on Saturday and watched some of the Swiss stage, the group stage, and I know you guys got the playoffs coming up this weekend.
Next weekend, but yeah.
Or sorry, next weekend. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah, it's May 10th, yeah.
So I know like with all that's going on, like I kind of hinted at this a little bit in DMs, but I've just gotta ask. It's like the elephant in the room question for competitive Deadlock, just as an esport as a whole. How can we make this game spectator friendly? How can people actually enjoy watching Deadlock without just getting lost in a way?
Yeah. So I think
Is
that's
it doable?
not only the theme of Deadlock, but I would say that that's been the theme of a lot of games for the past like 10 years. In the sense that a lot of games are like, for example, you think of like Overwatch, you think of Marvel Rivals, you think of all these games that are essentially like, shooters or like third-person shooters with abilities, and then that are in a 3D space. And the difference between like Deadlock and Dota, for example, is Dota you have the overhead view. It's a little bit easier to understand what's going on, and you're not really in a 3D space. You're more like in a 2D space, right? There's no verticality. I mean, other than like tiny airlines, you're not really like getting any significant verticality. Whereas in Deadlock, verticality is like a skill, and there are heroes that like literally like benefit from verticality, like Lash, which is the hero I play the most, is like his entire kit is around playing around verticality, for example, which is very cool from a gameplay perspective. That you all of a sudden you've added another element of depth to a MOBA that's already fairly complex. But from a spectator perspective, it is harder. However, I think that it's honestly not as big of a problem as people make it out to be. My perspective on it is the fact that, for example, my event had a fair amount of viewership. Like we were above like the 1-win tournament happening at the same time, and it was like literally like the 1-win playoffs. So it wasn't even just like group stage of that tournament. And if you combine like 1-win's viewership with my tournament's viewership and all that stuff, there's still a lot of people watching, especially for a community that's like fairly dormant in the sense that like Deadlock is just waiting for the next big thing, and there's a bunch of people, right? The peak player base was like 170K concurrent. Now we're at like 12K concurrent. So we're like less than a tenth of what it was, and there's still a lot of people watching these things. And I think if you have a dedicated player base, people are going to watch even if it's a little rough. Obviously, the spectator UI needs a lot of things Dota has, right? I'm sure that'll come. Like net worth swings during fights, like damage dealt by players, like all of that stuff will just make it a lot more enjoyable rather than casters kind of having to guess like who popped off in a fight, because sometimes it can be hard to say. But I don't think it's going to be like something that prevents the game from succeeding.
Okay, so I'm gonna piggyback off that and say, so you're talking about why you feel like people watch Deadlock, basically, and I guess when you threw your Death Slam, or like you're still continuing to do it, like you mentioned in about 10 days, is it meant to be more for the people playing? Because you talked about giving these people an opportunity that weren't pro players.
Yeah.
Is it more so for the people that are playing it, you feel like? Or is it more so like a community building spectator event? I know it can be both, and it probably is both, but like what, I guess like when I'm thinking like, okay, we'll get to probably a point where Deadlock has spectator options like you mentioned, but like right now, what does Deadlock need in your opinion? Like what it needs to be the core focus for the community in this dormant kind of waiting period time?
What does Deadlock need, like, as a game?
Yeah, like I'm saying, like, what are you trying? So I guess what I'm trying to figure out the right way to word this, but like, okay, so there's a lot of upgrades to the spectator experience that could potentially happen. There are definitely doubts about how difficult it is to follow everything with that extra dimension of verticality. But like for people who, okay, so Dota has a lot of people who used to play it but no longer do, right? But they still like watching it. And since it's because of the fact that there's a lot of people that are clearly still interested in Deadlock, but the player count has significantly decreased. I just have to assume that also applies to Deadlock. So when we're talking about like the spectator experience, these like community tournaments that you're running, I'm thinking like, who's your targeted audience and what are you trying to give them? Do you know what I mean? Like, are you trying to give them something that keeps them holding on to Deadlock? Go ahead. It sounds like you understand what I'm trying to get at now.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so it's a two-part. Obviously, like you said, it is both. It kind of like, it can't not be both. But there is obviously a focus. For me, my focus initially was the people playing the event. The hopes is, okay, so one differentiator for my event that I haven't mentioned is the fact that essentially I'm spending time with each of the teams in the event to like give them coaching for free, right? So I'm taking a lot of time out of my time where I could be doing other things like paid coaching, which I do as well, to give kind of this coaching to these teams and help them out. And for me, that was like the main goal, was to give back to the community that's given me a lot. So I wanted to give back to these players, and that's why I only have 8 teams in the event, because I couldn't manage anymore. It was just like not possible for me, and I wanted to be personally involved with all of them. But like, if we do the event again, which at this point is very likely because it's been a big success, I would involve other pro players, and then we would just like, I kind of want, in TF2 there was this event called Newbie Mixes, which I was a coach in, and essentially it was taking players that are new to the competitive scene, because the difference between TF2 pubs and like competitive was like so massive, and there's like a completely different rule set and everything. So we needed this transitionary thing to help you kind of ease into it, and that's where I got the idea for this Death Slam a little bit, which is, let's do a tournament for the better than average player and have like essentially like a pro player help them out. And so I spent time with the teams. I like gave them drafting strategy. I like gave them like basic macro, like, hey, here's how you don't like completely like, here's how you don't look clueless in the game, right? And they all applied that, and it was actually very cool. Like, they were all playing as a team. Like, they were making a bunch of mistakes still, yes, of course, but like, it was cool. As far as what I want to give them, I want to give them a positive experience that they're going to remember for a long time, and new friendships, because I formed the teams off of individuals. So I want to create connections. As far as what I want to give the viewers, I want to give the viewers something different, something more relatable than the average tournament. The average tournament, I mean, you'll look at the top players, and obviously they're very, very talented, very good. But like, if you're an average player, you can't relate to it as much because, for example, in pubs, in Deadlock, Lash is like dominating, but in competitive play at the very highest level, Lash is like not winning a game. So it's very hard for the average player to like look at that and relate and be like, oh man, why are they not picking Lash? Like, that hero has like a good win rate in my pubs, you know? But then in my tournament, Lash is actually owning, you know? So like, it's relatable.
Appropriate.
You probably taught them all how to play them through your videos and stuff.
Yeah,
That's a bit biased that the person throwing the tournament, probably your subscribers and followers are gonna. I feel like there's enough people that came up to me at Raleigh and were like, we love Slark, we love Lifestealer, all our favorite heroes. Shocker, they're my viewer and they like the same heroes as I do. But no, I mean, that's really awesome, man. I mean, I feel like when we're looking at competitive, what immediately went through my mind earlier, and you just hashed on it, is one problem that Dota, I think, has more so now than it did before, and I think is an issue that's rising in a game like Deadlock as well, is the fact that there's no story to these players. Like I've tuned into several fight nights and like I see the 1 win versus VP and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I know like 2 of these guys, you know, or like maybe 3 of them, because I've watched their streams before. And aside from that, I don't know the personalities people. I don't ever see their face, maybe in like a post-game interview if I'm like lucky or something. But my point is that I think the community aspect of tournaments where people see familiar faces, they make connections. I think that's what makes games and scenes thrive. And I guess my question is that like what's needed for that to happen in Deadlock? Is there just need to be more official professional tournaments, or do you think that the teams need to put a bit more effort into it, or like what would be your take on that?
I think that's a interesting question. To answer your question, I think that we need to first talk about what is esports nowadays. Now, this might seem like I'm going back to the fundamentals, but I really do think it's important because esports has, in my opinion, changed fundamentally in the past 10 years, or even 20. Like, if you go back to, like, I don't know, go back to, like, 2003 Quake era, right? It's just, like, people in a basement trying to be the best Quake players. Like, that's literally all it is, right? And you've got, like, Fatality with his gamer food and all that stuff, and it's, like, esports is so different nowadays. And if you look, I think Los Ratones, the League of Legends team, if you guys are familiar, I think, to me, that's the new face of esports. That's what esports is nowadays, is if you're an esports player, you need to understand that you're an entertainer. At the end of the day, no matter how good you are, it literally does not matter. The only reason you make money is because people watch what you do, right? So you entertain people. That's your livelihood. That's what you do. And so I think part of the answer to your question is, do teams need to put in more effort? Potentially, yes. But the thing is, the average esports player does not necessarily understand or want to give what the average esports spectator wants. Because the average esports player usually might not be, first of all, socially very good, right? Because the type of people that tend to play video games a lot, you know, like 10 hours a day, tend to not always be the best socially, right? And the other thing is also they tend to want to win at all costs. And the more public you are, well, you know, it definitely hurts your chances to win because people know more about you. They know more about your hero pool. They know more about your playstyle. They know more about all these things. So being public is not an advantage from a competitive perspective, right? It's only an advantage from a marketing perspective. So now what does the scene need? Well, at the end of the day right now, there needs to be incentives, because let's say that you're a Deadlock team, and you want to be more public, you want to give more storyline, etc. You want to, I don't know, stream scrims, you want to do all that stuff and, like, you know, give a perspective. Well, it's hard to kind of break into because there's not really new viewers or a new market to exploit. And so you would be putting in a fair amount of effort and you would most likely not get very rewarded. But for example, what I've been doing with my team is, ever since I formed my team, you know, we've streamed pretty much every single scrim. Like, there's been scrims we haven't streamed, but realistically for the past 7 months, I think I've streamed probably 99% of the scrims that I've played. And so there's a big storyline, and, like, people enjoy watching us play. We might not be the best team. In fact, we are not the best team. But there is that storyline, and there's the viewership, and I think that that's something people underestimate a lot when it comes to esports.
I feel like if I tried to say exactly what you said, like I would love to be able to articulate that exactly, because I feel that resonated with me a lot. The differential between what esports players are offering and what esports viewers want, I think, is like a huge, just a general, like a chasm in all of esports. Yeah. I feel like, and I definitely can see how that would apply to Deadlock, and it actually makes me realize like how like universal content creation is, just like basically it sounds like all the problems you have or that you're thinking about, or the factors and taking into consideration, they're pretty much the same dilemmas that I've been mulling over a lot of my Dota career. And I also ran into some of that when I was doing like my Deadlock. I did about 2 months or so on YouTube as well, and I guess with all that being said, you know, what you said you get asked these questions all the time, like what's the future of Deadlock looking like? When's this next patch gonna happen? But in all seriousness, you mentioned like if it doesn't work out, there's a lot of factors within my control that I can't, whatever. They're like I said, they're outside of your control. But what do you think the future of Deadlock looks like in regards to the competitive scene, the game making a comeback when it's officially released? What are your if you had to make predictions or gut feeling?
Strictly related to the competitive scene or just as a whole?
Honestly, either, both, whatever one you feel like is more interesting to talk about.
Okay, so first things first, if you want to be able to predict Deadlock's future, you have to understand the people that are in charge of Deadlock at Valve. Now, there's a lot of rumors that IceFrog is working on Deadlock. Is it true? I don't know, but I think it's pretty likely. I mean, we see a lot, we see a lot of Dota themes, right? It's just every time they add like new items or like there's little items that are copy pasted from Dota. Like, let's be real. Like, Unstoppable is just BKB, right? I call it BKB still, even to this day. The tier 3 camps are just ancients. Like, I just call them ancients, and now I've gotten like half the community calling them ancients, unfortunately, for the better or worse, and to me, I have a ton of faith into that development team because as many issues as Dota has had through its lifespan, to me Dota is currently like if I had to pick the best game that's out there as far as competitive esports goes, it's Dota right now, or maybe CS, but like CS2. If it wasn't CS2, I would maybe say CS, but CS2 has its issues, so I would say right now it's probably Dota, and so I have a lot of faith in the development team of Deadlock, and every change they've made, in my opinion, has been positive and has moved in the right direction. Now, of course, there's still a lot of issues with the game, and who knows when the next update is going to be. I mean, at this point, I would hope it's going to be soon. It's been 2 months, so I think and Valve has a vacation in April, so I think it's pretty likely that it'll be soon because they were probably they were on vacation, so they couldn't publish it, but now they're probably going to get back to it and publish it probably sometime. Yeah, I would expect in May. As far as the future of Deadlock, I personally am very optimistic. I see Deadlock having a future that might be similar to Dota. Now, will it ever be as big as Dota? Obviously, can't say for sure. Dota has a huge legacy behind it. Started as a mod, you can't really replicate that type of legacy with a game. But what I do know is that Deadlock is a lot more interesting to the new gamers than Dota is. Dota has a huge new player problem and has had a huge new player problem for a long time, and it's very hard to get into. I think Deadlock is a lot more approachable, and I think it has a lot of things that people enjoy a lot about video games. It's just politely speaking, it just attracts the Zoomers more as well, right? I think it's got the little bit of a more Zoomer gameplay to it than something like Dota does, where you can shoot someone, and that's very satisfying. So what I see happening, my predictions, which I say on stream sometimes, are I would expect, and I could be completely wrong. Maybe people will clip this and then in a year I'll be like, look how wrong it was. I would expect open beta sometime by the end of this year or beginning of 2026. And I don't know if we're ever going to get a full official release moment where it's like, hey, this is the full official release moment. But if that was ever to come, I would expect that to be roughly in something like 2 to 3 years. But I think open beta, which is what people care more about, which would be Valve making an announcement and the game being accessible to all without needing an invite, because you still need an invite to play the game technically. And it might not seem like a big barrier, but it's the most wishlisted game on Steam, or second most or something. And it is a barrier because, let's say you're little Timmy, you just got from school, you're 15, you want to play Deadlock and you want to download it. Well, you can't. Someone needs to invite you. So you need to figure that out.
Poor Timmy.
So that's my predictions.
Poor Timmy.
No, I mean, we've talked about that barrier. It's not a joke. It's a huge deal when it comes to getting the game. The difference of free to play versus even a $1 game is astronomical. But now think about the fact that the game is, you can't even just download it. You have to reach out to another person.
You have to be
get an
social.
Invite. Yeah, it's a massive barrier to entry, and it's intended, right? So we know that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of cool hearing your predictions though, because I think my predictions at the beginning of the year and Brian's as well were a little bit more potentially optimistic. I think we were slating for sure open beta by the end of the year, like almost guaranteed, and then I was hoping for a summertime announcement, like of the release date, essentially, or potentially of like a new Valve event. But
Yeah, I'm not optimistic about something like that.
yeah,
I don't think. I
I would
think it's
hope so,
unlikely, but
but
who knows?
I
so
also
I got a
think
Maybe
it's
it
question.
happens when it
important to
happens.
maintain your expectations, or like to
Yeah,
Yeah, of course. I
yeah,
mean, I'm heavily invested, so like being pessimistic is like probably more reasonable for me because it's like
yes.
it's my livelihood, it's what I do, and so I don't want to like have expectations and then be sad about it or whatever. But like I think that it's very likely my predictions are gonna be somewhat accurate. We'll see though.
yeah. So I gotta ask then, what is something that Valve can do, like aside from like the balancing and stuff, but like what can Valve do to help out the competitive scene? You know, at some point,
Mhm.
whether that's now down the line, like what do you see their intervention being, if any, into the competitive scene?
Mhm. So good question. I will preface this by saying what Valve has done very well in general, which is I don't know how it was in Dota because realistically I have no idea. But what I will say is that in Deadlock, the developers are very, very receptive, and I've given them feedback directly. Other high-level players have given them feedback directly, and they definitely listen to an extent. I mean, they listen one like to what they want to listen to, which makes sense, right? Players are very good at pointing out problems with the game. They're not so good at suggesting solutions. So they're good at listening to the problem. Sometimes they might implement a solution and it might not work out. But I've definitely pointed out a lot of things that I've gotten change for the better. There's been this time where I made a video back in October about like a huge issue with the game, which was some soul sharing shenanigans anyway that could be abused.
Yep.
Um, Not to get into it, but like that got fixed extremely quickly. And in general, I have like a more direct pipeline to like the developers, and I can like I play the game a lot, and I can just communicate direct feedback to them, which is awesome. I don't know if that was ever a thing in Dota. I assume probably to an extent. Some pro players were able to communicate feedback about patches and stuff. But that's one thing that Valve has done well, is that they've given people a voice, and I know that some people on Reddit, will complain about like pro players getting a voice or whatever. But the reality is, I think that if you have a game that's healthy at the top level, the game will be healthy for the average player as well. Um, because, in my opinion, when something is happening at the pro level and it's an issue, like it was with Soul Rebirth, for example, which got removed from the game, it's just a matter of time before it comes to your average player. Like it's just that the average player hasn't gotten there in their learning curve yet, but in 6 months to a year, they'll be there, and it will be an issue for them as well. It just hasn't been an issue for them yet, but it will always become a problem eventually. When there's a problem at the pro level, it's going to trickle down. It just takes time. That's my
Yeah.
opinion, at least.
Okay, so you mentioned like this is kind of what Valve does, where they do that with
Yep.
Dota, where they do like back and forth with players. I think they do it less nowadays than they used to. So it makes sense in terms of them handling it similar in Deadlock and its formative
Yep.
years. But
Mhm.
I guess my question is, looking at all the changes on the map and like we've been talking a lot about the fact that it feels like they've been simplifying a bit of just the gameplay as a whole and making it, it's 2-2-2 rather than, I guess nowadays you could
Yep.
technically do like 3-1-2 or stuff like this, but a lot of the gameplay changes they're making,
Definitely not very
the map
popular.
changes, how do you feel about all of that stuff? You said that you feel like it's going in the right direction. Who do you feel like they're trying to cater to? Why do you think they're making those changes? Does it benefit the competitive scene, the average player, everybody?
Yeah, so I think to go back, so one thing that I think Valve needs to do in general is I think that they need to kind of not ignore the competitive scene, but like they need to have like the bigger picture view in the sense that the competitive scene right now or the game right now, like it matters a little bit, but it also doesn't matter. Like in the sense that what matters most is what the state of the game is going to be when it's like open beta and stuff, right? So they're playing the long game. As far as like who they're trying to cater to or what their vision, um, it's very, very clear to me that they're trying to make the game more MOBA like. So at first,
Yep.
the game, if you go back to May, the game was a MOBA, yes, but a lot of the MOBA elements were like heavily watered down. Or, people hadn't figured it out yet, but like essentially there was a lot of things about it that were just kind of like, oh, well, this doesn't really feel like a MOBA. For example, 4 lanes. Um, it's funny because I've seen some posts about 4 lanes that are 4 lanes versus 3 lanes that are saying 3 lanes doesn't have macro, whereas 4 lane had a lot of macro play. And to me, that's funny because if you showed those people a map of Dota and you told them that you had a TP scroll and you could go anywhere on the map, any objective on the map every 70 seconds, it'd be like, well, how can you split push? I mean, someone can just TP to you. I mean, it's just not possible to split push, right? But obviously it is possible because it's all about trade-offs of what you do on the map. And like if there's a fight happening, well, you know, they have to decide to TP to you, and then you can TP to that fight and all the mind games, etc. With Deadlock, 4 lanes had the biggest issue, which is you always were dealing with creep waves, like always.
Yep.
It was essentially the game was just deal with creep waves. Like that was the game. There wasn't, I mean, there was macro play, of course, but you had essentially to deal with so many creep waves that you didn't have time to do jungle invades or all these plays that are more common, right? Obviously, there's no smokes in Deadlock, but like the type of plays you see in Dota where people are going to hit a power spike, they're going to smoke, they're going to look for a fight. You didn't really see that in Deadlock because it was just like you were dealing with creep waves constantly. So if someone contested you on a creep wave, a fight would break out. With 3 lanes, there's more jungle now as well. So there is a little bit more play for that type of like, hey, we're going to look in their jungle, steal their resources, go together as a group of 4 or 5. We just, you know, we have like our holiday lasso, we're going to look for a pick, etc. So they're definitely trying to cater more to that. And with the changes they've made from balancing as well, they've made the game more spellcasting oriented than it originally was. There was definitely metas where it's very gun heavy, and I'm of the opinion that Deadlock is terrible when it's a gun heavy meta.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, my cat just fell.
Poor guy.
He's good though. But yeah, so I think that. Oh, nice. I think that Deadlock needs to be like 60-40, like 60% spellcasting, or what it's called in Deadlock, which is spirit. I think it needs to be 60% spirit, 40% gun. I think that's just what's most enjoyable about the game. When you just get melted by like full gun, like it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel as fun to use. Like people want to use their abilities. People want their abilities to be satisfying. So I think they're moving a little bit more towards that. A little bit more towards like a traditional MOBA with 3 lanes. And also all the changes they've made make roles more of a thing. So they're moving slowly towards a little bit more roles. Like support in Deadlock has been a little bit fake for a while. But they're moving more and more towards support being real. Like initially, support was kind of a joke, but now with like all the soul sharing changes they've made and stuff, it's more possible to funnel net worth into people than it was before by a lot, and so support is like more existent.
I personally loved hearing your thoughts. I feel like a lot of them lined up with what like vibe checks we've been having, but you know you're grinding in and day out through your games, and it definitely we've definitely felt like every change that Valve has made has been kind of in tune with like what makes Deadlock enjoyable. And we've been saying like, you know, guns are great, it adds a cool dynamic to the game, but people want to cast spells. People like, I even mentioned that not having to actually get the last hit on the creep for it to, or on the trooper for it to raise a soul, like for me that means I can look to zone somebody away from it rather than having to make sure I'm shooting it when it's about to die. Like for me, that's an example of I get to potentially spellcast and run at the guy a lot more than, you know, just purely playing the like shoot something, target something gameplay. And that was when I've been watching the professional matches. I've thought lanes are way more dynamic than back when I was really grinding it out myself towards the early days of the embargo. So everything you said made a lot of sense to me, and I really appreciate all that perspective on the gameplay, the future of Deadlock. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
That's good to hear.
I think in general, like we are all on the optimistic side of the future of Deadlock. You know, I think that's one of the things that we're hopeful. Like we love the game. It's an incredible like mix of fun genres. So I will say we're kind of looking forward to what you're cooking up next. You know, we're hoping the Death Slam ends up being a continuous event. I know I will be tuning in at least for the actual playoffs, and it sounds like you said you want to try and run it again. I'll probably enter the next time. I thought about entering this time. I was like, I could, like I'm definitely good enough, but I had a few other things going on, so I was like, I'll wait. And then Chuck got real mad at me, and he was like, you should have entered. But you know, I'll sign up for the next one. But yeah, one of the things we always like to do at the end of our episodes as we kind of round things out is we bring it back towards kind of like a non-deadlock segment. Unless Brian, do you have something you want to ask first?
No. I think this is a good closing point. I feel like
Okay.
I feel like I feel like a listener. Whenever we do our guest episodes, and I feel like as a listener, I have a really good idea of what led Deathy to the situation, like to doing what he's doing now, and also how he feels the scene as a whole and the movement that Deadlock's going to take. I feel like I have a very clear picture, and I think it's a great place to wrap up with our what have you learned this week? That's what Ricky was alluding to. We always like to have a little, what's going on in your life outside of Deadlock? What's just a small tidbit, could be a huge life lesson. We never know. Something that you've learned this week. Could be a random fact.
So we'll let you go first, and then we'll do some as well.
All right, I'm just I'm thinking a little bit because I don't like to answer questions without thinking. I would say one thing that I've learned this week, and it's funny because to an extent Deadlock taught me this, but at the same time Deadlock is my life. It's very hard for me to separate, so please forgive me.
No, that's fair.
Is that it's very important in life there are very few things that are worth compromising your morals for, even if it's just a little bit. And that when you have a position of power, people expect you to take ownership and make the decisions, even though they might not tell you that. And it is your responsibility to do what is right, essentially. This might seem like cryptic or whatever. People that are familiar with my stream probably will understand a little bit more where I'm going with that, but that's essentially what I've learned. It might seem like a big thing. It is a big thing for me, but like I've never really been in a position of power before, but I've learned a lot.
Yeah, that was a cool one. I'm just gonna say right now, dude, you think literally just like me. This is freaking hilarious to me. I'm literally listening to somebody, a mirror of myself here. You go next, Ricky, so we get a little space between the clones.
The oddly too cryptic people. With
yeah. I'm always a bit cryptic with my lessons as well. So.
So I'll keep it lighthearted. So this week, I learned that like sometimes it's just worth like making a life upgrade, like rather than overthinking it too much or trying to worry about like the different things, like whether it's like money or time or something. And it's like if it's going to be a significant improvement to my life or like something, I'm like, yeah, it's like I've wanted this for a while, but I keep just like, oh, what if something better comes along? Like I just needed, like sometimes it's just like stop overthinking it, because I'm super analytical in the way I approach a lot of things in life. Like I try to literally look at every one of my options and possibilities and then like deep dive research things, and I'm like, I should just get this because I'm going to be happy once I have it. And like long story short, it was just about buying a new TV. Like I have like a 10-year-old plus TV, and it's just like I get so frustrated watching movies or like HD content on it because it's just like it's just not good. And I was like, I just want a new TV, and I've been talking about it for like half a year. And I just like looked at my girlfriend. I was like, can we just go buy a TV like now? She was like, sure. And I like, it's so bizarre to me that the decision was so simple for her. She was like, yeah, why not? Like, let's go do it. And for me, I'm like, I've been dreading this for like 6 months, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And yeah, sometimes, it's like, just don't overthink it sometimes,
Overthinkers rise up.
Yeah.
I'm in the overthinker club as well. I've been working on that personally. My lesson that I've learned this week is that I've always been trying my best to compartmentalize between like work and hobbies or passion projects. And often as a content creator, the hobbies / passion projects have to do with your work. Kind of like you said, Deathy, like as much as I'd love to think my life isn't just esports and content creation, a lot of times the lessons I learned do involve that. And I guess for me, one thing, a clear line I drew in the sand this week that it feels like one of those lines I've known was there. I've heard people mention it, but now it's so clear to me, is whenever I think of something that I have to do as like a task that I could do. These are not required things. These are things that could be nice for future endeavors or maybe life upgrade or like work upgrades and things that would benefit me in, you know, maybe a month from now, a year from now, whatever. I wouldn't feel them immediately. I just ask myself the question, how often do I be thinking about the fact that I didn't do that? And so the lesson I came to this week was there's one thing I was like, there's a little small thing, and I'm like, that's probably not going to make a big difference. But then I keep finding myself randomly thinking about it when I'm about to go to bed or something, and I'm like, I'm still not confident this is going to do anything, but screw it. Like I just keep thinking about this randomly. So every time I'm mulling over, should I really get up and do that extra work at like 7 p.m. or like, should I develop that skill? And it's this feeling of I'll feel way better afterwards because I'm just no longer freaking thinking about doing this thing, and I'll have known that I did it. And half the time it doesn't even work, but or more than half the time. But yeah, that's my takeaway. So kind of similar on the overthinking category. But for me, that was like enlightenment of, okay, how often am I going to think about this? It's going to be a lot. Just do it. Fuck it. You know? So that's where I'm at.
I love it.
Makes sense.
Well, that's fun.
That's a great learning.
That brings us to the end of the episode. I just want to say, Deathy, it's cool to finally sit down and talk with you. You know, as someone who's I've watched a lot of your content over the last almost year, or I guess like 8 months, 7 months. Yeah. So it's cool to kind of get your thoughts and ideas on kind of just the current state of Deadlock and the competitive scene. So, is there anything that you'd like to say before we end things here this evening?
I just want to say thanks a lot for having me. For me as a content creator, it's kind of like life's come full circle to be speaking with you guys, as my origins are very much, you know, a lot Dota oriented and Dota influence. So it's I'm very happy to have gotten a chance to speak with you guys, and very grateful for the opportunity. And I also want to say just thank you to anybody that's going to be watching this and the Deadlock community as a whole. I can never be grateful enough for having the opportunity of like doing this as my job and like getting to talk to cool people and thinking about games for a living, and so I always have to show gratitude for that.
Always
Super
be grateful.
wholesome, man.
I'm grateful for having you here, man. Honestly, like every time or when Ricky mentioned, I was just like, I've never really like dabbled into the NA region too much when it comes to stream watching, just because anybody that's streaming your window, like I live in Europe, for people who don't know, because people still don't know that.
No.
You know, for me, it's like 2 a.m., so I just don't get the chance to watch your streams. But I'll just say I found your insights very insightful, and I enjoyed them a lot. So I'm sure everyone watching did as well. And as grateful as you are for having them, I'm sure they were grateful equally so for hearing it as much as I was. So thank you again, and we'll be seeing you around in the community, man.
Oh, yeah.
All right. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. This has been episode 19. We'll be back next week with episode 20 on who knows what. We still got to figure that out. But if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're on Spotify, just follow it. But thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful time. We'll see you next time.
Peace.